The shooting range. In this episode, World War 101. Tactics and strategy, explaining all World War game modes. And pages of history, the first battle for Vitebsk, one of the biggest battles of World War II. On the 14th of May, we launch a massive beta test for a new game mode, allowing players to take part in famous historical battles. World War is now available to everyone. Let's see how it works. World War is built around squadron battles, but even if you're not a part of any squadron, you can still play it. Any player with at least one Rank 3 vehicle in his or her hangar is eligible to play World War. That's basically it. No other restrictions. Furthermore, in this video, we aren't going to discuss the World War from the POV of a commander. The only thing you need to know right now is that they launch operations, move armies, and take care of other highbrow stuff. What's important is that their actions result in battles where two squadrons face each other in deadly combat, with the help of free-roaming players. How to get into one of those? Click on the World War tab here, and then All Battles button, revealing the list of all active battles, both that are happening right now and that are launching soon. You can join any of the available ones with one exception. If you're a member of a squadron, you can't fight against your own mates. If you never swore allegiance to any squadron, though, feel free to choose any side you like. It is 100% okay to partake in a historical fight that you're interested in without digging deep into the intricate details of a global struggle, or to support the squadron you like. An operation isn't just a single match. It's a number of battles that are combined to create a special historic scenario. Every scenario has its own historical background, vehicle lists, and its own victory conditions. One operation takes roughly 2 hours to play through, or less if one of the squadron manages to fulfill their winning conditions sooner. All matches adhere to RB rules, but with a special set of markers developed specifically for World War that might remind some of you of what we have as a system for active scouting. At the same time, you can't just use any vehicles available to you. Every scenario has its own limits, which is only natural, as it would be extremely weird to, let's say, encounter a jet in the skies of Vitebsk early in the war. Does that mean, though, that you have to own particular tanks and aircraft to play World War? Not exactly. It works like this. When joining a battle, you're randomly assigned a few vehicles that your army has access to according to the rules of the scenario. Take them and crush your enemies. Keep in mind that if those few vehicles given for the battle include vehicles that are already assigned to your active slots, then you'll get to use your own kitted-out versions with all your modules and crews. If not, then you get a stock version. As simple as that. Of course, in fact, the system for allocating vehicles is a bit more complex than that. You're joining an army that has a limited number of vehicles. During combat, some of those will be taken out and will become unavailable. But this sort of management is yet another thing that commanders have to take care of, so we won't concern ourselves with it right now. We'll just suggest that you should take a look at the list of vehicles available for the scenario that you're interested in, and then put the corresponding vehicles that you have in your active slots. This way, you won't have to fight on a tank without parts and FPE, for instance. A few other important things to remember. Different battles within a single operation might have different vehicle lists and different types of missions. You might have to attack enemy defenses, or to withstand such an onslaught yourself. It could be a convoy mission or a symmetrical domination battle taking place in the air, on the ground, or both in the sky and on the ground at the same time. We'll discuss the different game modes of World War in detail a bit later in this episode. As for now, let's say a few words about air battles of World War. At the start of every match, aircraft spawn in the sky. There are no airfields. What you get instead are special zones where you can safely leave your aircraft, and it won't be considered a loss for your army. One last thing, when getting ready for an air battle after putting all the right aircraft in your active slots, it's also a good idea to unlock as many payload options for them as possible. The thing is that a commander can choose what payload setups are going to be used in the match. And if you don't have those available or simply forgot to replenish ammunition and weapons, you might find yourself engaging enemies on a strike aircraft without a single rocket at hand. That's probably all the basics that you have to be aware of. And now, let's change the topic slightly and take a look at all the game modes that you're going to play as a part of World War. When two armies meet on the map, a battle starts. Depending on the type of vehicles those armies are made of, the battle will be fought according to the rules of one of the few different game modes. We'll leave all the map action to commanders again. Let's take a good hard look at the types of battles we're going to fight. Defense. One team is defending, the second one is attacking. It's pretty straightforward. Attackers have to penetrate enemy defenses and destroy their key positions, while the defending team has to survive the onslaught within a specific time limit. Both teams start on the ground, but if a commander decides to bring reinforcements, then aircraft might join in on the action. That's something that you have to be very wary of in every engagement that starts on the ground. Stay vigilant. AA defense. It's pretty much the same. The only difference is that attackers are flying in, trying to get rid of a number of stationary ground targets, while the defending team tries to fend them off with their SP-AAGs. Convoy. The attacking team has to destroy a column of ground vehicles before it reaches its destination. The other team tries to make it within a specific time limit and protect the convoy. Depending on the types of armies playing this mission, the attacking team might be using aircraft or tanks. Cover. This is a mode for planes only, where both teams are using fighter aircraft. Apart from player-controlled planes, there is also a number of AI-controlled bombers and strike aircraft in the sky. The first team have to protect those planes at all costs, while the second team tries their best at wiping them all out within a time limit. Head-on course. This type of mission is nigh identical to cover, but this time both teams are on equal footings, with each team taking care of their own flight of bombers and attack aircraft. Players try to eliminate the priority targets of the opposing team while preventing enemies from destroying their own. The team that is better at both these jobs wins. Domination. If you play a lot of random ground battles, you will feel right at home. Teams have to cap 3 zones on the map and hold them until the opposing team runs out of tickets. Air domination. Both parties are using fighter aircraft. The objective is to eliminate as many enemy aircraft as possible and achieve air superiority. This is a good time to remind you that there are zones when you can leave your aircraft safely. If your bird sustained heavy damage, try to make it there and then J out, so that your team can keep on fighting. Obviously, on top of that, there are a lot of other factors defining what kind of match you're getting. There are vehicle lists, and there is a pool of respawns that is getting progressively smaller every time your team loses a vehicle. But If you're just a tanker or a pilot eager to join the fray, you don't necessarily have to consider all that. Whatever the game mode, the goal is always the same. Deal as much damage to the enemy as possible, play the objectives, and do your best to survive. And we move on now to the new pages of history. Today we'll speak about a well-known battle that you can now take part in one of the many scenarios of World War game mode. This massive engagement happened during the most brutal month of what Russians call the Great Patriotic War. It seemed that the forces of the Third Reich rushing to the east couldn't be stopped. Hell, even slowing them down seemed nigh impossible. By the first days of July 1941, while Wehrmacht infantry divisions were busy crushing the last pockets of resistance of the Western Front, units encircled near Minsk, the tanks of Hoth and Guderian, were already advancing east, and advancing fast. Germans were sure that the Red Army was almost defeated by that point. Their next target was Vitebsk, an important transport hub, basically serving as the gates to Smolensk, the last stop on their way to Moscow. At the same time, the second line of Soviet defenses tried to get ready to make a stand. It was utter chaos everywhere. There was no intel on the enemy. There was no communication. Strategic plans of the command contradicted each other, and all of that against the backdrop of a complete collapse of the Soviet infrastructure. The commanders of the 16th, 19th, 20th, and the 22nd Armies didn't know what to do. They had no means of knowing where the enemy was, what their numbers were, and where they were going. Air recon was impossible. Germans ruled the skies, and the units that were meant to stop Germans were still coming piecemeal. Tanks arrived, but without ammo and fuel. A few infantry units, but without weapons and ammunition. At the same time, orders coming from Moscow were loud and clear. "Advance, press the attack. We already defeated the core of the German army. All that's left is to deal with the remaining force." The battle for Vitebsk started on the 5th of July 1941. The 7th Panzer Division ran into the hastily fortified positions of the Soviet 153rd Rifle Division and was forced to stop its advance. Other German panzer units started to go around this unexpected resistance zone. The tanks under the command of Lieutenant General Hoth went by the northern route, while Guderian's forces were encircling Soviets from the south. Both commanders were in for a nasty surprise. In the early morning of the 6th of July, both corps came under heavy assault by tanks of the Red Army. Soviet tankers, lacking knowledge of the true scale of the enemy offensive, assaulted the Germans themselves, believing they could envelop enemy forces. All of that happened so fast that the Luftwaffe reconnaissance units never got a chance to report on the crazy Soviet rush on time. And while units serving under Hoth managed to take up defense, Guderian's forces were in for a hard beating. The 17th and 18th Divisions of the 47th Panzer Corps were first attacked head-on and then from the flank. The blitzkrieg ground to a halt. By midday, both sides were throwing in everything they had. There were more than 1,000 tanks participating in the battle. That's also the place, to the west of Seno on the banks of western Dwina, where tankers of Guderian and Hoth first encountered a few T-34s and some fearsome KVs that the German Panzer IIIs, Panzer IVs, and also tanks the Germans had captured in Czechoslovakia were simply unable to overpower. By the 10th of July, the tides had turned. The Red Army was fighting furiously but blindly, without much recon or a detailed plan. The Soviets were attacked mercilessly on the ground and in the sky, and finally encircled. Wehrmacht Corps had already found all the weak points of the Soviet defenses, and were thus able to continue pushing to the east, crushing infantry and cutting off supply and communications lines. On the 11th of July, German forces were already in Vitebsk, while Soviet tankers, with tanks that had run out of both fuel and ammo, had no other option but to blow their own vehicles up and try to make it to the Soviet forces through enemy lines. The Battle of Vitebsk became one of the biggest tank engagements of World War II. The fire that claimed countless armored vehicles burned away all the illusions that soldiers and officers of both armies still had. The Soviet command realized that tanks weren't that effective as part of the huge and sluggish tank corps, and that intelligence was crucial. While Guderian and Hoth, both busy accessing casualties, were forced to admit that the Red Army is nowhere near being beaten into submission. Nowadays, the battle for Vitebsk isn't just a part of our history, but also one of the scenarios that you can relive as a part of the World War game mode. Try to conquer, or try to defend Vitebsk yourself. See if history can be changed. From a player called Chris on PC.
Guys, can you please add new modes?
Hi Chris, and other members of the community that like to ask us questions of the can you kind. Today, given the fact that you all know about World War and the bunch of new game modes that come with it, the answer to this question is kind of obvious. But it's a perfect chance to say once again, we might not be able to tell you about the things we're currently working on, but we never stop building and expanding the game. And many things that you ask for will make their way and their appearance on our service, this time or another. Then there is a message from Grey Fox. Is there a video how to learn to shoot on the move? Yep, we covered this topic in the 125th episode of The Shooting Range. Please check it out. And there is a way to solve this problem entirely, or almost entirely, by relying on vehicles outfitted with stabilizers. We talked about different stabilizing systems just recently, in fact, in the episode number 145. Mr. Waffentrager writes,
Can you please tell us what is textolite, which is present in Russian tanks?
They are pretty hard to pierce. Hi. It's basically a multi-layered composite material that is some fabric impregnated with polymers like epoxy resin. It's light, sturdy, and viscous. When combined with the conventional armor plates, it provides a vehicle with decent protection, while not encumbering it with much extra weight. By the way, we're pretty sure there is at least a piece of textolite right next to you. The motherboard of your computer is most likely made out of it. Dark Frostmare asks,
What happens after you guys at Gaijin run out of existing vehicles?
Oh, that won't happen anytime soon. It turns out us humans are really good at creating combat vehicles. Nations of the world churned out countless vehicles already, and they still keep on coming. Not sure we can keep up, actually. The next tricky question was sent by a user called HGK Network Gaming. What's the best tank in the game? It's the tank that you know how to play. That's not just our game. Even IRL, there's no ultimate tank to beat them all. More armor, more often than not, means less mobility. A bigger gun, the longer reload speed, etc. Tank designers of all nations try to balance those things out in their own way, and do try to find a kind of ideal combination for the time. But in the end, they just create vehicles fit for different playstyles. Lord Info asks, does the amount of fuel in the aircraft affect its performance? Yeah, of course. Fuel does weigh a lot, even when driving a car. You probably experienced it yourself. A car with a tank full of gas performs a bit differently and is a bit more sluggish. When it comes to aircraft, every extra kilogram of weight has an even more drastic effect on performance. Obviously, we had to model it in the game. The last message comes from Triforce Gaming.
I can't wait till we get climbing the ranks with planes.
It is coming, we promise. You won't have to wait for much longer. Well, that's it for today. That was The Shooting Range by Gaijin Entertainment. Come on, please subscribe to the channel and click that bell button. Leave a like and tell us what you really think in the comments below. Good luck playing World War, and see you all in a week.